In this report, I discuss weird diseases to avoid in retired cheap countries. Today I received an email from Richard asking me to talk about common diseases travelers can get in developing countries and whether you can get shots to prevent them before flying away. This is such a great question. This is why I keep telling you I have the best travel community in the world. I've lived in and visited 67 countries since leaving the USA in 2007. I have over 100 reports on vagabondbuddha.com that teach people the best places to retire cheap in paradise overseas. I'll show you pictures of some of my favorite places as I talk about travelers' diseases. Ring the bell when you subscribe so you will hear me answer other great questions from this community. Many of the countries I have visited and that I would enjoy retiring on a limited budget are sometimes called developing countries. So Richard's email reminded me to share with all of you that there are some funky, weird diseases around the world that you need protection from. Weird diseases to avoid in retired cheap countries. This video will share with you how to avoid these funky, weird diseases. One of the most important things you can do before you leave your home country is to find out what diseases you need to worry about depending on what part of the world you'll be visiting or retiring. If you already are living in a developing country, you should visit a local doctor and make sure you're up to date on all the shots for diseases you may not be familiar with. After I discuss how to get information about diseases near you, I will discuss whether or not I have gotten all of the shots the CDC suggests. I'll also talk about how to get the shots for as much as 80% off US prices. I also want to talk about whether you need these shots to board your flight or can you wait until you land in paradise? Before I left the United States in 2007, I went to the travel clinic in my city and they told me that since I was moving to India for 2 years, I needed to get certain shots to avoid common diseases in India that are not so common in my home country, the US. They recommended around 9 different shots back in 2007. Okay, finding shots recommended for your destination countries. The shots they recommended will vary based on where you'll be going. They also change the recommendations over time, so I suggest you get the most up-to-date information in order to avoid one of these weird diseases. One of the easiest ways to find out is to type the following sentence into Google for each of the countries you intend to visit or live in over the next few years. Let us assume you are going to the Philippines, but you also plan to visit Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand while you're in Southeast Asia over the next 3 to 5 years. You would type the following 4 sentences into Google and get the names of the suggested shots for the places you intend to visit. Don't take notes as you listen. I will provide a link to my webpage with all of this at the end of this video. Okay, CDC recommendations for each country. On the day I did this search, Google returned the following links for the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia based on the searching the following sentences. For example, CDC, what shots should I get before moving to the Philippines? CDC, what shots should I get before moving to Vietnam? CDC, what shots should I get before moving to Thailand? And the same sentence to Cambodia. If you click the CDC link for Cambodia on the day I wrote this report, it would take you to this page at the CDC. On the right of the page, you'll see a red arrow that points to vaccines and medicines. If you click that link, you'll come to this page that suggests vaccines and medicines for Cambodia. Make sure to read the entire page so you understand the risks and ways you may be able to reduce the chance of catching diseases prevalent in whatever countries you're interested in visiting or retiring to. But just for conversation's sake, for Cambodia, the CDC is recommending shots for chickenpox, diphtheria, tetanus, I can't pronounce all these, flu, measles, mumps, rubella, polio, shingles, hep A, hep B, measles, rabies, typhoid, and Japanese encephalitis. They are also recommending taking malaria medicine with you in some cases, depending upon where you will live in Cambodia, and it's there in their report. They also warn you of several other diseases that have no vaccines by telling you what behaviors to avoid to reduce the chance of catching them. I didn't take the malaria advice when I moved to India since the incident was low in the city I lived, but I do have a report I suggest that you watch called Top 11 Tips to Avoid Dengue and Malaria. I provide a link to that. When I moved to India in 2007, I don't know whether or not the CDC had published this sort of information online at that time, but they do now. So in 2007, I went to the travel clinic in my city and got the shots they recommended for India at the time. Finding the travel clinic near you. If you want to find a travel clinic in your city, try Googling the words travel clinic and your city name. If nothing comes up, try larger cities within a few hours drive of you. Once you have the information about vaccines and other prevention strategies, then you can decide what precautions you want to take and what vaccines you want to take. Many of these vaccines they are recommending you may have already taken in the past, or you may have taken them so long ago that you need to refresh them. Once you know the names of the vaccines and diseases, you can drill down a little deeper on such things as where are they prevalent in the country I'm going to? Maybe they're not going to be where you are. What would it cost to get the shots in your home country versus getting them in a cheaper country upon arrival? And what recommendations you might be comfortable not taking? Do you get all the shots recommended? When I was moving to India in 2007, I was a little naive, so I asked what it would cost to get everything done. I honestly don't remember what the cost was, but it was way, way, way more than I wanted to spend. So I did a little research online in 2007, and I found out that I would be comfortable not doing everything they recommended, right away at least. I also learned that some of the vaccines had to be spread out over several months, and I would be leaving for India in a few weeks. So I emailed a few people and found out that I could get second and third doses for some of these vaccines once I got to India. I didn't need to get all of them before flying to India. Save money getting some of the shots at destination countries. I also learned that the cost of the shots in India were as much as 80% cheaper for the same vaccines. So I decided to get 6 of the shots before flying to India and then just have a doctor in India give me the other 8 or so shots. Another example of this is when Chung and I flew to Colombia from Mexico, we found out she needed to get a yellow fever shot for Colombia. I already had one. But the doctors in Mexico wanted to charge, I think it was like $200 for her yellow fever vaccine. But Chung hunted around and found out that she could get the yellow fever shot in Colombia at the airport when she landed for free. Long story short, I eventually got everything the CDC recommended, but I saved a bucket of money by getting the major portion of it after I arrived in India. And India's prices are similar to many of these other retired cheap in paradise locations, much cheaper than the Western world. There's another simple truth that not many Western doctors will admit to you. They may not know every single weird disease that pops up in some remote area in a foreign country. It would not be unusual for only a local doctor in that remote area to be familiar with that weird disease. So one of the final steps you could take when you are in an area long-term is to speak to a local qualified specialist about diseases that might be common where you live that is not on the CDC vaccination list. Okay, are any shots mandatory before you leave your home country? This brings up a very important question. What shots are mandatory before you fly to a foreign country? Now, I'm going to answer this question by telling you about my own personal experience, but I can't guarantee you that you will have the same experience I did. Okay, here we go. After visiting 67 countries over a 15-year period, I've never once been asked to prove I've received a vaccine of any kind that I can remember until this year. Seven of the 9 countries I visited since COVID broke out have asked me for written proof that I've been vaccinated. That is the only time I needed proof of a vaccine to either board a flight or clear immigration. So if the past is any indication of whether or not you need to prove you're vaccinated with any of the CDC recommendations, it is possible you'll only need to be shown the COVID vaccination, but not any of the other ones. Of course, they can change the rules. Nevertheless, I was vaccinated by everything the CDC suggested within a year of arriving in India. I just saved a bunch of money by getting it in India. Because nobody has ever asked me for proof of vaccines before COVID, I haven't paid much attention to it over the last 10 years. It was only Richard's email that made me pull out my vaccination card from 2007 from India to see how many vaccines I got back then. The only other time I looked at the card is when Chung mentioned yellow fever vaccinations were mandatory in 2018 when we entered Colombia in Central America. At that time I checked, and I already had it in my vaccination card. But unsurprisingly, neither of us remember being asked for proof of our yellow fever vaccine when we boarded our flight to Colombia or when we landed in Colombia and cleared immigration. In fact, we know it could not have been required because they offered Chung a free vaccination at the airport in Colombia after we cleared customs, and they never asked for my vaccine card. I've probably forgotten something here, so feel free to ask questions in the comments. If I don't know the answer, it's possible one of my highly traveled listeners will know the answer. Thanks for reviewing my content, Weird Diseases to Avoid in Retired Cheap Countries. Just click the link in the notes below this video to get this content in writing. And while you're there, make sure to grab a free copy of my ebook, How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World for 15+ years. Hey, if you liked our video, please like, comment, or subscribe. Any of that would help our business. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
This is Dan of Vagabond Awake, the YouTube channel for vagabondbuddha.com. The world is your home. What time will you be home for dinner?